Eighth Man, all these things. It was just, and of course we were reading the Marvel comics, so it was the Marvel comics. Like the DC, about the only one that we read was like Green Lantern. And then at the time it was
that the Denny O'Neil version with Neil Adams?
Right, the Denny O'Neil, which we'll talk about later. But they don't. The only DC stuff we read was the Kirby stuff that Kirby was doing, right? And then the Neil Adams stuff.
That's it. That's
and then, the Neil Adams stuff. So Neil Adams did Batman. Those books were good at DC. Those were good. And then they were like retconning Superman. So Superman was still okay. So Superman, they were doing it because Neil Adams was doing like some stories and covers. And at that time, this was like the early 70s. So that's when they had Kryptonite No More, and they were trying to like Marvelize Superman. So all those books were okay. And then, of course, all the Marvel books. So anything Marvel did was good. And then also Thunder Agents that Wally Wood did, that was good too. And then Charlton Comics, anything that Steve Ditko did. So it's like Captain Atom, Blue Beetle, and then, of course, a couple of the other characters, Judo Master by Frank McLaughlin, who passed away today at 84. We knew Frank. Frank McLaughlin was a pisser. He was like the guy, the old guy, get off my lawn. And Frank was he hated everybody, but he was funny. He just passed away today. So this is the kind of stuff we were reading. And these gave us our ideas. So Neil Adams, and then next year, so George and I went to the Comic Cons together, and then there was an EC Con. They had a separate con for EC Comics. The EC was they did the Mad Magazine. That was Bill Gaines. He published Mad Magazine, but in the 50s he had Tales from the Crypt, weird science fantasy, all those books. And those were all the books that were banned because they were, they were going after the violence in comics because, God forbid, these comic books were making these kids become juvenile delinquents. Okay, so EC Comics, there's like Wally Wood was an artist. It was Reed Crandall, George Evans, Johnny Craig, Jack Davis. They had all these great comic books. It was it started to come back. People were like getting into, and the reprints were starting to come out. So they had a whole convention for EC. It was only one convention there, but they had all the artists that were there, and Bill Gaines was there. And it was Bill Gaines. He had the beard and the long hair. He kind of looked like Santa Claus, but he was a character, Bill. But for whatever reason, and I'm talking to everybody. I started yakking to him, right? So I'm like, what am I, 16? And I'm talking to him, and he goes, how would you like to come down to DC Comics and meet Carmine Infantino, because we want to get ideas of what the young kids are thinking of the DC books. I want to invite you to come down to and have dinner with Carmine Infantino. Carmine Infantino, of course, was the artist for The Flash or whatever, and at that time, he was the publisher for DC Comics. I'm saying, oh, okay. It's like it happens every day. So Bill Gaines, who's like a legend in comic books, is inviting me to give my opinion on the comic books that are being published now. So like the next week or whatever, we set up, and I go down to the offices of DC, which at the time were on 3rd Avenue in the 50s. So I meet them, and I go to the office. Carmine Infantino is like Carmine is Carmine, and Bill is Bill. And we go across the street. There's an expensive steakhouse there. They take me out to dinner. And they asked me, so what do you think of the DC Comics? What's your opinion of the DC Comics?
He says, they suck.
I said, basically, they suck. I said, basically, here's the thing, because what it is, they were having to battle with Marvel. Much like today, where you have the Marvel and DC movies, and the Marvel movies are kicking ass. It was the same situation with the comic books. The Marvel comics were outselling DC 2-1, and they were trying to figure out, what can we do, So I basically told them, in my own inimitable way, I said, well, basically the comics suck, except for the stuff you're doing with Neil Adams and Jack Kirby. So Neil Adams, good. The Green Lantern, Batman. Jack Kirby, good. The rest of it sucks because your characters are not realistic. They're boring. So Carmine really didn't care for that too much, but Bill got a kick out of it. And he was kind of needling Carmine. It's like, see, the kid knows, because Bill Gaines was like a revolutionary. So he, and Carmine was kind of like, when they were doing those books at that time, they were doing some of the books, like the Neil Adams books, and they're trying to be more relevant, but then they were kind of like doing like goofy stuff, like Lois Lane comics, and Lois Lane becomes black. I mean, it was like stupid stuff, stupid shit. It's like,
how did that? I mean, how did they even pull that off?
They did. I mean, people said this is stupid, But the thing, so I went back to the office, and they gave me a bunch of comic books for free. And Carmen goes, "Well, kid, when you get out of high school, come up here, and I'll hire you." I said, "All right, fine." So actually, I eventually worked at DC, but not for him. But as we digress, so how do I get started in the comic book business? Okay, so then I graduated high school. Graduated from Cardinal Hayes High School. Out of high school. So I had a couple of little jobs, Howard Clothes, whatever, in the Bronx, and then in Manhattan. There was a chain called Howard Clothes.
Cheers.
And coincidentally, my friend that I made with at Howard Clothes in the Bronx was a guy named Nestor Serrano. Now, you may know that name, Nestor Serrano. Look at the IMDb, because he's a big actor now. I'm still friends with him. He worked with Scorsese, and he's done TV shows and all kinds of stuff. But anyhow, so George Perez was working at a bank by Rockefeller Center, which was down the block from where DC Comics was. So that was a coincidental thing, But in any case, later in '74, a friend of mine, that friend, T.J. Glenn, T.J. Glenn says, "Hey, I just heard that Archie Goodwin is looking for writers for the black and white magazines at Marvel." Right?
Yeah.
So this is the connection that I made at the convention 3 years before. So he's telling me, I was friends with TJ. He says, "Go." So I just go and say, "Okay, fine." So Marvel Comics wants the writers? Good. Okay, I'll go up there. So 575 Madison Avenue, look at the comic book. Oh, that's where they are? Okay, fine. I get on the train. I go up to the office, knock on the door, go in, and it's like, "Oh, yeah, hi. I'm here to see Archie Goodwin." I didn't call up ahead of time. I hear he's looking for writers. So okay. So then they could call him, right? And Archie comes out. He goes, "Oh, hi, how you doing?" "Oh, hi, I hear you're looking for writers." He goes, "Yeah, come in." So I go in, and I typed up a couple of ideas for a couple of black and white magazines. One was for the Planet of the Apes magazine. I said, I'll do a whole breakdown of the special effects of the Planet of the Apes movies, because I was a real geek on that stuff. I was reading all City Fantastique magazine, all those magazines.
Did you work on number 6? Because I have number 6 floating around somewhere. Maybe you can sign it for me.
I could, yeah. and then the other thing was for the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. I said, well, I'll do a movie, The Weapons of Bruce Lee, from different movies, because I was a Bruce Lee freak too. So he goes, "Oh, that sounds good. Well, you write them. If I like them, I'll buy them." So I went home, and I wrote both articles. And then the next week I came in, and he liked it, and he bought them. And so then I was in. It was like 1974. I was 19. I was in. So I said, "Okay." He said, "Oh, this is great." I bought it. So then it was like, then I met Tony Isabella, Tony Isabella, Black Lightning. But he wasn't doing Black Lightning. He was working at Marvel. He was editing the black and white, the British weekly magazines that they were doing. So then I got in my own way. I weaseled my way in there. I made friends with Marie Severin, and then
She just passed away,
he just passed away. Duffy Voland, who was an editor, he passed away a long time ago. Duffy was a former fan writer, and I knew him from Fan Days. So definitely was a great guy. He was this kind of big, kind of chubby guy with a beard, blonde hair, kind of looking like the character in Thor. What was that character? Mm-hmm. That heavy-set character, one of Thor's pals.
Yeah, Volstagg.
Yeah, Volstagg. He looked like Volstagg, but he was also gay. But this is in the years when no one's. But he was out. But he was great. Definitely was great.
So he was a Stonewall guy.
Stonewall guy, yeah. So so I made friends with all these guys, and then like Stan would come back. So then Stan goes, "Oh, one day I forget what it was. It was like, oh, I need someone to help me with this stuff here, whatever." And he was like, I'm putting a package together for producer Milton Subotsky, who wants to help me out picking out comic books to send to. Yeah, I'll do it. Okay, yeah, you're hired. Come on. So then I kind of started doing, assistant to Stanley. So one of the things I did was Milton Subotsky was a producer of Amicus Productions, and he did like all those movies with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. Dr. Terror's House of Horrors.
Like and Hammer Films?
Well, that was a competition to Hammer Films. Oh, okay. But he had just done The Land of Time Forgot that Marvel did the comic book adaptation to. So he had bought the rights to do a Hulk movie.
Nice.
So I was, I guess, hired or whatever, and I became like the go-between. I sent out all these comic books of Hulk to him in England. I have a letter back I just found that, oh, thank you, so I kind of like was giving the messages to Stan on this thing. And one of the things that he was going to do was the Hulk was going to be stop motion animation.
Cool.
It wasn't going to be, a guy painted green. And they were trying to get like Ray Harryhausen to do the stop motion animation, from Jason of the Argonauts and the Clash of the Titans and all those, famous movies, but he only had the license for a year, and he could never get the financing.
That's pretty cool.
So that was
that's like an untold Hollywood gem right there.
It's a Hollywood gem right there. But anyhow,
and then it wound up being the TV series.
And then 2-3 years later, then it became the TV series, which he wasn't involved with, but that was it. So so I was at Marvel Comics, and then I was doing some writing for some articles, and then when Don McGregor was editing, then Don McGregor became the editor of the magazines. Mm-hmm. This is why I know Don for years, and it was like, I've got to. He was doing the because I was right at the time I was going to college and doing this, right? Mm-hmm. So I was writing the reviews for college. So it was like, this is funny. So he's going, I got to get photos. We're doing a Billy Jack magazine, but I can't get any photos. This is Don McGregor. I can't, Don's like, I can't get any photos. Don's always very excited.
This is a very good impression.
I said, don't worry about it, Don. I got you covered, because I just gotten the press kit for the Billy Jack movie. Was it?
Did he wear those velvety shirts back?
Yeah, yes. Was it the second Billy Jack movie? Billy Jack Returns, or right. Whatever it was. So
you get the collection on Walmart.
Yeah, exactly. But because he was having like Neil Adams do the cover, so because I was getting all these press kits from the studios, because I was writing the reviews for the studio at that time. The movie studios would really were pursuing the college audience, so they would like send you tons of photos and stuff, and we went to screenings, and it was great, That's how later on I got to meet.
You gave me part of that thing during that time.
Yeah, that's how I was able to meet Sean Connery on my birthday and go to lunch with him. But that's another story. That's later. But this is like one of the things I just gave him. This is one of the things I got. This is what is this?
Zorro the Gay Blade.
Zorro the Gay Blade. This is a lobby card set from Zorro the Gay Blade. We used to get all this kind of stuff.
There was the George Hamilton movie.
Yeah, George Hamilton.
Yes. I just gave that to him today because he's a Zorro freak, So. But anyhow, what I was saying. So I get so Don was thrilled. Now the thing that was even more thrilling for me was that it was like a press kit of like 30 photos, and they were going to use all the photos in the Deadly Hands of Kung Fu issue. And the thing that was even better was that, for the writing, you would get like, I don't know, $100 for writing the article. But for the photos, they were giving me $20 a photo, and I get the photos back. So it's like, whoa, wait a minute, hold it. It's like, this is better than writing. It's like, let's get the photos, and it's like, boom. So all those issues of Deadly Hands of Kung Fu that you see with all I supplied all the photos for it. I was making more money than writing, just supplying the photos. The other one, the James Bond issue. There was another one that I took Don to the screening of Man with the Golden Gun, which he hated.
Really?
He hates that movie.
Why?
But it was hysterical because it's terrible. A terrible James Bond. But it was funny taking him to so I took him to the screening because he wanted to see it. Oh, I got to see it. Because he was writing the article on the movie for the magazine. So I took him.
So you gave it a bad review?
So I took it. Oh, yeah. You have to read the issue of Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. It's like a whole 20-page article on how bad this movie is. But I got paid for all the photos, so I had to print. So I got, But it was funny taking Don to the screening, and he's like, "Oh, this is awful." I was like,
he was invited too.
No, I think
he wasn't invited. I was invited. I took him.
That was the first Bond movie I think I ever saw in the theater.
Oh, yeah, that was Roger Moore and Christopher Lee. I mean, it's amusing now, but yeah, at the time it was like we're watching. It's like this is horrendous. Like,
and Tattoo, Tattoo from Fantasy Island.
Exactly. But this was before Fantasy Island, so that's where I got the idea. But anyhow, so I was making like good money with the photos at Marvel. It's like, hey, this is a good gig, Right. It's like they need. Now we want to do. I'll just go. So I just went, and a lot of these were from United Artists, so I knew the publicists there, so I would just call them up. Hey, you got a press kit for? Yeah, come up to the office. I would go up to the office and pick out all the photos, whatever.
He's got tons of these.
I got tons of these photos.
He had an original James Bond painted poster, and you sold that one.
I sold that one. I still have boxes of photos of the James Bond movies because that's later. I'll tell you about James Bond. My connection.
So this is when you were at Marvel. You said you also worked with DC too.
Well, that's later on. Mm-hmm. There's an in-between section at Marvel. Marvel's not done yet. Mm-hmm. The best part is coming.
The best is yet to come.
So then
we got all night.
So then, the end of 1975 or whatever, we got all friggin' night.
We got all night.
So anyhow. So 1975,
I gotta go to work tomorrow.
1975, right? Mm-hmm. So Marvel did their own convention. I don't know if you guys remember this. Marvel did 2 conventions. They did the first one. They did Phil Suling ran. So because I was working at Marvel then, so I went to all the Phil Suling conventions for free.
That's cool.
And so he ran the Marvel Comics convention in '75. And it was pretty good. It was at the Commodore Hotel, which is now, I think it's the Grand Hyatt by Grand Central. But it was a great venue for these conventions. So, I was like part of the Marvel crew there and, went to convention. It was cool. I got to meet, Jack Kirby, and he came up from California because Kirby was back at Marvel at that time. And then all the rest of the guys, except for Steve Ditko. He was already away from Marvel, but that was good. So then, that was a very successful convention. So then after that, then it's like I go to the office one day, and Stan is there. He goes, "Hey, Tom, come here. I want you to meet somebody." I said, "Okay, fine." He goes, "Meet Vinnie Coletta."
Oh,
listen,
the infamous
Vinnie, the infamous Vinnie Coletta. I love Vinnie. He was a nice guy. He goes, "Listen, Vinnie's got is going to run the next convention for us." So Vinny goes, "Hey, Tom, how you doing? Stan's telling me about you. Hey, so, hey, you want to help me run this convention or what?" And he mentioned a dollar number, and I said, "Yeah, sure." He goes, "Yeah, I need someone to, help run this convention, to do the, the panels and get some movies in there and, get some guests or whatever. We're going to have all the Marvel guys, but get some other guests, help me run this thing and do a program book, all that." I said, "No problem." So then I became like the guy running the Marvel convention in '76, basically. So I was in the office like every day, and it was like it said, anything you need, you just go to the production office. You tell them you need this, whatever, blah blah blah, and tell them, they give you an argument. Tell them, talk to me.
You know what you're missing here?
What am I missing?
You need a cigar in your hand.
Oh yeah, hey, I need a cigar. Hey,
a cigar.
Actually, Vinny chain smoked, so like.
Yeah, exactly.
But
doing his voice, you can have the cigar.
So Vinny. So then also at the same time, I was like, then I'd help Vinny do some backgrounds too. So I got into like doing backgrounds on some of this stuff. But basically, so I helped run the Marvel convention, and so I did the program book, which is going for like $100 now or more. Is
that when you dress up as Spider-Man?
Well, that's later on.
Oh, okay.
I dressed up as Spider-Man on Channel 9.
One of the first cosplayers.
Yeah, well, cosplay, whatever, but it was like, it was in April of 76. So I go to the office. The show is going to be the next day, and Stan's in the office. He throws a Spider-Man costume at me. He goes, you have to show up at Channel 9 on the news. You're going to be Spider-Man. I said, really? Okay. I was a lot skinnier back then. Yeah. So I ended up going down to Channel 9, which was in Times Square, and they interviewed me as Spider-Man. We went to a playground around the corner. We almost got arrested by a cop because the cops come up and they say, what the hell's going on here?
There's this pervert in these tights.
Right. Yeah.
Hanging around little kids.
Well, no, we're doing a thing for Channel 9. Oh, okay.
Yeah, now you have all the fake Marvels in the cleaned up Times Square.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So,
there's a male prostitute dressing
so
up
I had the costume on, and then I forget who I was with. I was with somebody from Marvel, one of the other Marvel people. So we ended up walking down Times Square. We ended up going to, we did something at the Daily News too, and did a photo shoot at the Daily News. So we did that or whatever, and then so that was like my day as Spider-Man in 1976, before the TV show. I was Spider-Man, but anyhow, so we had
that before or after like the Midnight Cowboy thing with that guy.
Oh, that was that way after.
Oh, that's way after.
It was like Spider-Man.
Yeah,
like Spider-Man on the boulevard.
Whatever, I don't know. But so I was running, and then the convention was pretty funny too. But one of the things that I did was for a film show. So what we're going to do with a film show that's special. So Vinny had connections at Warner Brothers, and since we were doing the Doc Savage movie, the Doc Savage comic book, and we did the movie tie-in, he got. I went over to Warner Brothers and they gave me a 60mm print of the movie, which hadn't even been out yet.
That's awesome.
You
still have that one? So that'd be awesome.
No, I had to get that back. After the show. But so I had the brand new 60mm print of Doc Savage, which hadn't been in the movie theaters yet. So I had to take it home. So I had it home. I actually had a 60mm projector because I collected films at the time. I had Maltese Falcon, whatever, different movies. So I actually ran that at my house for a bunch of friends before the movie even came out. And then, brought it down to the convention. We ran it to the convention. People even come up to me now and say, oh, that was the first time I ever saw Doc Savage. I remember that. And we screened it a couple of times at the show. We had, a couple of thousand people looking at it. And then the other thing I got was from Republic Pictures. It was the first time in like 30 years it had been shown the Captain America serial. We got that film.
That's cool.
The original.
Wow.
From 1944. So that was like 15 chapters. We ran that. Wow. People flipped out because that had not been seen in 30 years. It never been on television.
I don't think I own that. I have a lot of serials that I don't know.
But it's on YouTube now. Right. Yeah, but so we ran that, and then so then a few months later, towards the end of 76, and that's when DC comes in, because then Vinny got hired to be the art director at DC. He goes, hey kid, come on, you're coming with me to DC. You're gonna be my assistant. I said, okay, fine. I just went along. I just walked into this shit. It was not like, oh, well, you had this plan, right? No, I absolutely had no plan.
You're like the accidental tourist.
Yeah, exactly. So then I became his assistant art director at DC for a couple of years. I was at DC, and
Don't about the Astron came up.
well, no, that's later. And so at DC, amongst the things that I was doing, I was the assistant art director to Vinnie Coletta.
This guy's amazing.
And then they had me do other stuff around the office, like copyright renewals, and I found out that a lot of the early issues of Superman are public domain, but don't tell anyone that. But in any case, then it was like, go straighten out the library, because they had a library, all their archives, and I found this cardboard box. It's this big cardboard box. I look inside, and there's a friggin' Superman costume in it. And I pull it out, right? The Superman costume, and on the label says George Reeves, right?
Oh, that's cool.
It's this heavy wool it's the friggin' George Reeves costume from the color years. And it's like, oh, I said, you okay if I put this on? He goes, yeah, go ahead. So I put it on, and I was walking around the office. It fit perfectly. But you see the sweat marks underneath there. But it was very heavy wool.
Really?
Heavy wool was made out of it. But
that's cool.
now I know why he hated that costume, because it was like
hot.
So I wore George Reeves' costume.
That's cool.
And going back to George Reeves, I got to go back to why this was like a special thing, because you see, George Reeves, because my father really was not around much, because he was out gambling or whatever, he used to do numbers and things like that. So, but anyhow, when I was 4 years old, 1959, I'm on the bus with my mother. This is going back now. This is a flashback.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on the bus with my mother in the Bronx. It's the number 12 bus on Tremont Avenue. I'm on the bus, and there's a newspaper. I see people reading the newspaper, and my mother's trying to hide my eyes. Don't look, don't look. I said, no, look. And I see is Superman on the cover. And I could read a little bit there. It says, Superman dead. I go, Superman dead? No! And I was like, crying. No! And I was like crying. I cried the whole day. It was like, and Superman was dead. I could be dead.
And shot, no less.
And shot. So it was like, Superman dead. And I go, no. He jumped out a window because he was trying to see if he could fly. That's what my mother said. Yeah. And I was very confused, because then later on that night, I'm watching him on TV. He goes, but wait, he's dead. How's he on TV? And that was very traumatic for me. And actually, a few months before that, Lou Costello had died.
Mm-hmm.
So this was very traumatic that these guys died.
So were children like committing suicide by eating kryptonite?
Right.
In memory of Superman?
Right, or whatever. I don't know. Anyhow, so that's a flashback. So going back to DC Comics now. Fast forward.
What year are we in?
We're in 76.
All right, so
fast forward.
4 years old. All right.
Fast forward, DC Comics. Okay, so the Superman suit. Then we find out that they signed a thing, blah, blah, blah. They're going to do a Superman movie, And
so maybe they killed George Reeves so you wouldn't get the option.
Right, whatever. All right, shut up, Ray. So one day, walking in the office, Tom, meet Mario Puzo. So, oh, how you doing? How you doing? Mario Puzo, he's a short, kind of chubby Italian guy. Hey, how you doing? Mario Puzo. So it's like
Godfather.
That's right. It's like, holy crap, Mario Puzo. He goes, yeah, he's writing the Superman movie. Oh, really? So he was coming in, go talk to the editors or whatever, talk to us, whatever. A few months later, what do I have in my hand? Hey, Tom, go Xerox this. What do I have? I have this 500-page script in my hand. And what is it? It's Superman the movie, written by Mario Puzo. I go, oh, you go, Tom, could you Xerox a couple of copies? Sure.
To make one for yourself.
Well, yeah. So I'm Xeroxing very slowly, because as I'm Xeroxing it, I'm reading it. I was like, oh, this is good. Oh, yeah. And I get the part of one scene is a good scene. This is Superman. Lois Lane is being kidnapped by terrorists. And they have like machine guns and stuff. And they're dragging her to the roof of the Daily Planet building, because they have a helicopter there, right? And it's like a machine gunning, whatever. So then Superman comes, and it's like comes there to rescue him. So they're trying to shoot Superman, whatever, and bullets are bouncing off him, whatever, right? And he picks up, a couple of terrorists. And he throws them off the roof. I went, wow, that's like so this is kind of stuff that was in like the Mario Puzo script.
It was Lex Luthor saying, "I got it off you."
I mean, it was pretty violent. All right.
Was this where they wanted? Didn't they want James Caan to play Superman originally?
Well, they had a bunch of people, and I actually saw some of the photos of the. They had Stallone.
Sonny.
I saw Stallone. I saw some of the Polaroids. Stallone.
Wow.
I saw Stallone in the Superman costume.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't look good though. I know they asked Robert Redford, but it didn't work. I think Khan. There were a whole bunch of people did it, but finally they did get Christopher Reeve.
Who was unknown.
And Christopher Reeve got the part. And then, I remember he came to the office the day he got the part. There was a big meeting and blah, 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 blah. Oh, it's Superman. Oh. He's a nice young guy. He was a couple of years older than me. He was like 26, I think, at the time. I was like 21. So it was like, so then it was about 8 o'clock at night until we all were leaving. So I ended up leaving, because I had talked to him in the offices, and then we were both leaving, and we're both in the elevator. He's going, because I said, I was going on the subway. I was going downtown. He goes, I'm going downtown too. I said, let's just take the subway. Okay, So I got off the train with him, and it's like, we got on the subway together to go downtown to the Village. I said, well, what you doing now, Chris? He goes, well, I'm going on an audition. I said, now? I said, you just got the part for Superman. He goes, well, you never know what happens. This is true. Hollywood. True story. This is like the day he got but he went on an audition for some other thing. But obviously, it worked out. But I kept in contact with him. I saw him later on when I was on the set of the Superman movie in England. And then, of course, they were shooting it in New York, and we were all there watching them shoot stuff.
Didn't they shoot the first two movies simultaneously or something?
Yeah. Yes, they shot all of the first one and most of the second, but then they were running out of time, so they only shot about 85% of the second one. When I was in England, I saw some of the sets for, something like the moon set with the lunar module there and all that stuff. Later on,
I always thought this. Richard, the guy.
Richard Donner, right? Richard Donner, and then they fired him afterward because he didn't get along with the Salkinds, and then they got in Richard Lester, who ended up reshooting a lot of film so that he would get sole credit on Superman 2.
Didn't Richard Lester do A Hard Day's Night?
Yes, he did. Richard Lester did The Hard Day's Night. He did the Three Musketeers, Part 1 and 2. He did the Help, of course. He did The Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum with Zero Mostel. A lot of great movies. And of course, then we did finally get the Richard Donner version of Superman 2 about 10 years ago. But 2006, they found all the footage and everything. They recut it, and it's a totally different movie than the Richard Lester versions. But
how was it different?
The Superman 2 of Richard Donner is a different opening. It's the opening that was filmed when I was there, where it's supposed to be Lois Lane is trying to prove that Clark Kent is Superman, and she kind of figures out by drawing on a photograph of Superman, like the glasses and the suit, and it's like figures out Clark Kent is Superman. So she decides in front of in the Daily Planet to jump out the window because she's convinced that Clark is Superman. So she jumps out the window, and of course he manages to use a super breath to slow her descent, and she falls on a greengrocer cart outside. And that scene was never put in the movie, except now it's in the Superman 2 Richard Donner version, along with all the Jor-El scenes, which were cut out, along with a totally different scene where she shoots Clark Kent to prove that he's Superman, and in the honeymoon suite where they go up to Niagara Falls, and that's a different scene. There's a whole bunch of scenes that are different. So it's basically the same story, but it's different cuts and different. It's basically a different movie. It's a better movie, but in any case,
it's funny because even with the one that they released, I actually preferred Superman 2 to the first one.
Yeah, well, most people do because there's more action. But if you look at it, it was actually supposed to be two movies that have put them together to be one movie, because it was supposedly the original ending of Superman 1 was supposed to be when he's throwing the nuclear missile into space, it explodes and it releases the villains, and they're supposed to see, next year, coming next Super. It was supposed to be like a cliffhanger, which they didn't do, obviously.
Yeah, I remember my favorite scene was at the end where he, there was that scene in the beginning where I guess because of kryptonite he lost his powers temporarily, and some bully guy in some diner roughs him up, and then at the end of the film he comes in, as Clark Kent to the same place, and of course the guy starts up with him again, and he then picks him up and throws him across the counter, and then throws cash down on the counter for the owner and leaves.